Today I'm going to be talking about Persona 3. It's one of my personal favorite RPGs, and I'll be talking about the themes of the game, the gameplay, the philosophy, and whatever else comes to mind. This is going to be a heavily biased review, so expect me to try and sell you on it like a professional shill. It's a great game, but it's definitely not for everyone. For full disclosure, I played the FES version because it's still the best way to experience the game, and I also played it on hard.
What a gamer. What a god of a gamer, seriously.
It's going to be impossible to touch on everything, so, just a heads up. The game starts off incredibly strong. It's got a 10 out of 10 opening that really gets you in the mood to play. A great soothing title screen song. Oh man, it's just great stuff. Then you actually boot the game up and the mood of it is just set instantly. You're in the city walking down the street. It's noisy, but you can hear Lotus Juice playing in the background. There's a girl oddly pointing what appears to be a gun at her head while the music increases in volume, drowning out the noise. As our main character arrives in Iwatodai, things suddenly change. The music stops, dead silence filling the air. All electricity is out, completely shot. But our boy doesn't seem to notice the blood leaking out of everything, or the coffins lining the street. Unknowingly, the protagonist has entered the Dark Hour, a hidden 25th hour that only those with the potential to summon personas can experience.
Whoa, you're never gonna believe what time it is, man! Oh god!
Some of the game takes inspiration from Christian imagery, and while I'm not the most pious person out there, it reminds me of a line from the Bible. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. An hour that no one knows about that points towards the end. What else screams end times like people crawling into their coffins, looking away from what transpires, oblivious and seemingly wanting to remain ignorant in the face of death?
Ignorance is bliss.
This ties into the themes of Memento Mori, which I think the fan base has completely misunderstood and just uses an underhanded way to spoil newcomers of the series. Now, I fully intend to spoil the shit out of this game for you all, but I'll let you know before it's too late to pull back.
It's so fucking deep.
However, I doubt it'll ruin your experience of playing the game. I think we all played Persona 4 knowing who the killer is. So you go to school, goof around for a little bit, until the full moon comes out, and then this happens.
What?
I gotta admit, I really love this scene because it says a lot with just the visuals alone. You can actually miss out on what's fully going on your first time watching the scene, and it only really makes sense once you've gotten to about the midpoint in the game. Yukari over here jobs really hard, so you just kinda accept your fate and put your gun to your head and...
I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
Just kidding. You summon your persona, Orpheus, and holy shit, he just got ripped open. Nice! Your persona is completely overshadowed here, ripped open by the personification of death itself, Thanatos. Now, I find that this really highlights the sort of person that the main character is. Despite being a self-insert, he's a character with a background, and he actually does have a personality that you can make out. The main character starts off with clear grievances towards the loss of his parents. Overwhelmed by the loss of his parents, he isn't really able to be himself, and he takes on a new persona. What better persona to illustrate it than death itself? There's more to this, but the big theme of the game is death and living with it, and you do this quite literally in a variety of ways. It's not exactly subtle, but it is wonderfully executed here. So, due to the one guy who can actually fight being injured, you become the leader. I like how it's handled here because in Persona 4 and 5, you're the one responsible for creating the group. But here you're just walking into an already established one. You don't really know them, and even the people who join later are just foreign to you. They're not your friends, but you develop a bond along the way, and it's something that you had to work for by conquering the Dark Hour and what came with it. By the end of the game, there's a genuine connection, and it makes the story all the more heart-wrenching when something does happen to your teammates. And I'll talk about that more once we get to the spoilers. I find that gameplay is the one thing that gets critiqued a lot, but I really enjoy it. I'm the kind of guy who really loves optimizing things, problem solving, and the other games just don't have it the way that Persona 3 does. Most of the game is spent exploring Tartarus. I spent about 90 hours playing the game, and that's just what's recorded. I went for a perfect social link playthrough this time around, and I had to reset multiple times when I'd realized I'd made a mistake. So learn from mine, and never do this on a Persona playthrough, like any Persona. It's just not fun. It's really stressful, and especially on hard, because you're going to be strapped for cash the whole game. So, Tartarus. It's a big ass tower. It appears during the dark hour and serves as an important plot point, and as an ominous and mysterious landmark that unsettles at first glance. You have no idea why you're climbing it at first, and you aren't actually given any direction. The way that your party seems to view it is as practice for the 14 shadows that you fight in the game, but even after that passes, you'll still find yourself climbing it, seemingly without reason. Every month you're given another section of Tartarus to explore. You usually climb until you've fought the bosses of the month, which usually alternate between 3 mini-bosses and 1 big boss. These encounters also serve as waypoints for easily accessing where you left off. The part I really like about Tartarus, though, is that it's incredibly dangerous. The dungeon is randomly generated, with some things being fixed, such as the potential rewards you can get from golden chests being locked behind what floor you found the chest on. Because of the random nature, you really never know what's in an encounter, and you have to be careful about running around blindly. I found it easy to die if you were unprepared, and because of this, I almost never fought when I didn't have the advantage.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Learning to juke and outsmart the pathfinding AI is imperative to not reloading after an hour-long dive. You can easily cheese them by abusing the fact that they are not only paraplegic, but blind as well. Going up a set of stairs will allow the Alzheimer's to set in quickly, and you can quickly take advantage of them while their backs are turned. Alternatively, AI has very short range, and you can just simply run out of it and then come back. Typically after their AI resets, they turn around in 180 degrees.
For the sake of argument, if you come at me in a public situation, if I had to defend myself outside your apartment, I'm watching you through your window, and I have to shoot through a crowd of people to defend myself. It's 2 a.m. It's a self-defense situation.
Very quickly, you realize that your teammates are straight off of the short bus.
Thanks.
You can't control them, and at the start it really helps sell that these are amateurs. Over the years, however, this has become a bit of a meme. I'm going to clear the air a little and add a little bit of context. Okay, so later on, Mitsuru retires from being your navigator. She becomes a fully fledged party member. A lot of people seem to have a problem with her using Marin Karen, and I swear to fucking God, if I hear one more person bringing this up as if it's a valid criticism of the game, I'm gonna lose it. Not long after you get Mitsuru, you get a tactic called Full Assault. You even get a knockdown tactic right before you get her, so I have absolutely no idea how you managed to play this game and not notice this little menu over here that says tactics. You have a problem with how your party members handle? I don't know, maybe change their tactics. I think that you'll find that Mitsuru will use Marin Karen less if she's completely unable to. I very rarely see people actually bring up the real complaints that I have with the Act Freely tactics, which is what I assure you they left her on. The real issues that I have with this is that these retards keep throwing low HP healing items at each other when they could just end the fight. You have 700 HP, why are you throwing that? Why are you using that? That's not gonna heal shit! The dude does 300 damage, fuck! You can sometimes mitigate this by knowing who's going next and then hitting triangle to put them into rush mode, but it's not a viable action if the enemy is immune to their physical attacks. Stop memeing about Marin Karen, it's not an issue if you use your brain. Learn to play the game! The worst part is that I frequently see people bring this up, and you just have these people who reinforce the meme because they think that it's funny. It's not, and it's insulting to anyone who's actually played FES. The real issue is Junpei, an actually good party member, is casting Fire Break on an opponent when he almost never uses fire attacks. Just set your allies to full assault if you want them to attack, it's not that hard. Another issue with the AI is that sometimes it will just stand around and do nothing if an enemy is strong to their dominant methods of attack. I didn't always have this happen, but there were a few times where I had to toggle rush mode on for Aegis because she would just stand there. It was a rare occurrence for me, but I think that what the tactic system really needed was a secondary tactic. For example, if Aegis can't attack anything, put her on support. Boom, all of my problems fixed. It might seem like I have an issue with the tactic system with how I talked about the few issues that it does have, but I assure you that it's not actually that bad. And a part of the fun is gaming the system so that you can guarantee the result that you want. A good example of this is buffs and debuffs. Let's say that you can't spare the time to buff your team, but you need them to get a defensive buff while you heal, because otherwise they're stuck in a cycle of getting wiped out. Well, Aegis learns every support buff, you can't tell her directly to buff your team with Maraku Kaja. That's where Junpei comes in.
Who's the man?
He only learns Maraku Kaja and has basically no other support skills. Changing him to support your team for exactly one turn will almost guarantee that he uses his buff skill. At least, given that he can act while your party isn't injured enough to trigger his item usage. For me though, this is a very fulfilling way to game the system.
Is this some kind of twisted joke?
People also shit-talk the stamina system, and I really don't get why anyone complains about it because I find that it serves two purposes. One, it breaks up the dungeon segments, and two, it makes you think about your encounters. Stamina only drains when you win in a fight, so which is more valuable, 10 EXP or 100? Get the drop on a weaker enemy and then run, it will clear the encounter and you won't lose stamina. I personally like that it adds an additional choice for exploring. I often won't fight enemies if they aren't worth my time. In FES, I found myself with a lot of time to waste at night, so it's not like leaving and coming back actually makes you lose anything. On top of that, you get more stamina as you level, and it becomes irrelevant less than halfway into the game. It's a minor inconvenience at worst, and it also allows you to boost your courage for free, which means even more optimization, which means that I'm fully erect when I go in to see this guy, and why wouldn't I be? Just look at him. Now, the boss parts are where shit gets real. If I'm being completely honest, something like 75% of all of these fights become a joke. With the proper planning, you can cheese almost every fight. This game isn't hard, especially if you play on normal. The fights especially become a joke once you get Thor, and then fights that are immune to lightning just start whooping your ass. I did some hardcore grind for hours to get Mitsuru and Yukari off the bench, and it didn't even matter because they just died instantly. But, it was okay because I just won by auto-attacking. Sometimes you're just completely fucked though. Bruh. I had the misfortune of finding this piece of shit boss who would repeatedly cast fear on me, and then it'd skip my turn, and no one on my party is using the items that remove fear, and then I die to his bullshit ability next turn. So you might be wondering, how do I beat such an invincible boss? Well, I just take advantage of this stupid AI by casting buff skills so he'll continually remove them, and then just beat down on him. Bosses like that don't happen too often though, and there's usually an easy solution to everything. I don't want to come off as condescending, but if I can play this game on hard, then you can definitely play it on normal. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, then you can play it on easy. No one is going to gatekeep you, and if they do, they're really not worth your time anyway. I just want people to play this game as intended. Just go in, don't be afraid to look up a guide if you're lost, and learn how to fuse personas. Persona fusion is pretty straightforward, but it's also incredibly annoying. Just stop and retry until you get all the skills that you want on your persona. Be aware that some skills can't be passed on to certain types. As for finding out how to make what you want or what you need, there's a calculator for persona fusions that allows you to figure out what you need for a certain combination. The only issue is that it's sometimes busted. I wasted something like 2 million yen because this site said that I could get what I wanted with a bunch of persona that I didn't have, and then it turned out to be wrong. You might be wondering why I didn't just reload. Well, you see, the fusion can take a while if you're several steps off from making it, which is easy to do when you can't just make persona for the hell of it. I don't recommend playing FES on hard unless you enjoy wasting your time. I have never enjoyed the increasing cost that hard mode tacks on in any of the Persona games. It leaves very little to experimentation, and I get that you should do this on your second playthrough, but even hard mode is painfully easy towards the midpoint. Even the final boss is a joke. I wouldn't mind it if there was an easier way to get money, such as the gold hands, but some genius thought it would be a brilliant idea to give me all these imitation weapons that I will never ever use. These things suck, and I recommend not talking to the weapon fusion lady until you have something like this rad wind spear, as it fucks over the drop rate of coins from your golden hands. This money issue especially becomes a problem in the endgame because chests at the maximum that I saw them drop somewhere around $500,000. That sounds like a lot of money until you consider that grabbing a high level persona out of the compendium costs about $1 million, and that the chest can often have only 10,000 yen. It also doesn't help that golden hands do not exist in the optional Tartarus block, meaning that you have even less avenues to make cash. There are also these oracle draws at the end of battle. They give jack shit for money, take experience every time. If you play on normal, you won't have these issues at all, but I think that they're worth mentioning. The lack of cash really drove me to complete most of Elizabeth's requests. You have a variety of these, and you typically complete them on a month-to-month basis. I completed a majority of these, but some of them really want me to kill my wallet for a few outfits that I just am not going to wear because the stats suck. We're pretty far into this review, and I still haven't touched on what the actual combat is like. It's pretty basic. If you've played any of the later Persona games, you already know what it's like. But there are some key differences, which are important. You exploit enemy weaknesses in this game to knock enemies down, and they can do the same to you. If you can do something, then so can the enemy, and the only thing that they're lacking is the ability to use an all-out attack on you. And thank God for that. When you hit an enemy's weakness, you get one more chance to hit, so long as that attack knocked them down. If you're using an AoE, the attack needs to knock down all of the enemies. And if they're all down, then you can use an all-out attack. Some of you may be wondering if there's ever a time not to use an all-out attack. Yes, there is. You see, when an enemy is knocked down, they get back up again if they take a hit. So an all-out attack will cause them to get back up once again. If their turn rolls around and they're still on the ground, then their turn is wasted getting back onto their feet. This is important because fights can hinge on you taking advantage of this. In particular, the fight with the Reaper.
Hey people, Death here.
By wasting the enemy's turn, you gain a chance to recover the rest of your party, but you have to be aware of the turn order and your tactics for this to work. As always with any SMT-ish combat, always use buffs and debuffs. Enemies can hit hard, but they will hit for less if their attack is lowered and if your defense is raised. Tsukukaja isn't that amazing since it's still RNG whether or not they hit, but when you have the opportunity to use a fusion spell like Cadenza, there's no reason not to add on to your defensive power, as it will quickly invalidate most challenge the fight could have had. And this is how these games are meant to be played. Play smart, and ideally fill the gaps that your party has. It's okay to be a powerhouse, but you can't rely on Yukari. She's just no good on hard, and even on normal difficulty, she's not ideal. Your other party members can take care of the minor healing, given that you actually use a party that doesn't suck. And characters like Aigis and Akihiko learn full heal spells, but lack AoEs.
I need your help!
At that point, all you need to do is make sure that you can heal the full party if you need to. Be mindful of what you need, and you will never have a hard time in this game. So in my opinion, the dungeon-related gameplay is great. It can be a bit much though if you don't break it up. This game was not meant to be played in long bursts, and I think the mentality of completing in a single day really gave people a sour taste in their mouth while playing it. So what about the story? What about the day-to-day life? Well, it's pretty good. I don't care that much about life simulation aspects of this game. They definitely needed to flesh them out more, but I think that they help you to understand the game's themes. So, if you don't want to get spoiled, now's your cue to just go. So, when the original opening plays, one of the first things that you get to see is the term memento mori, along with a translation of it. Remember that you are mortal, and remember that you will die. It's a stoic phrase, and you can see stoicism in most motivations and actions in the game. Unfortunately, the fan base seems to take this translation literally, and think that it foreshadows the deaths within the main cast. And that's just a terrible thing to say though, because it's not true. The idea that memento mori was like crafted for this video game is just astounding to me, because I don't think anybody really bothered to look into it. The real shame in this is that memento mori is supposed to be uplifting. It's supposed to be like thinking, well, eventually I'm going to die, so I have to do things today rather than tomorrow. Because, you know, what if tomorrow doesn't come? And by remembering and acknowledging death, you're keeping it at the forefront of your priorities so you can center your life around preparing for today rather than wasting away and letting it roll off tomorrow. The character of this game is supposed to be a self-insert, but that really isn't true. There are clear motivations and ideas behind this character, and I'd like to bring them to light. Nothing ever phases you. Mr. Perfect. These are phrases used to describe the main character, and people seem to somewhat agree with this, often referring to the main character as boring. I find myself wondering if I even play the same game as these people. They often praise the social links of the female main character, a character added after the fact in the PSP version. The dating social links in this game are some of the worst that I've ever seen. Taking a quick look at the social links reveals mostly garbage. I wasn't aware that it was possible to make a social link worse than Yukari's, but somehow, they found a way. Look, I think we all want to fuck Akihiko.
I've been waiting for this!
But I'm not willing to wade through garbage to get to that point. Again, I'd like to say that almost all of the dating social links in this game are bad. The problem is that the female main character has social links lifted directly from the male main character that were originally dating, and on top of that, she has her own dating social links now. This means that about half of her social links are just pure garbage. It's all stuff that you've seen from the main story, just odd little bits and pieces regurgitated and stitched together. Only now you can become a registered sex offender.
This is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Nothing about this is good. Not one thing. God, I hate this. I hate this.
And it's not like this content is just tacked on either. I imagine a lot of people only played the female main characters route. And because of that, they lost out on a lot of stuff. Because man oh man, we really gotta cut all those social links. You know, social links that are integral to the themes of the game. Let's take a look at the Moon Arcana, okay?
I wonder where this mad thought floated in from.
Real fucking annoying guy. I know everybody hates this guy. He's a real fat piece of shit. Real garbage human being. Yet, he's integral to understanding the mindset of the main character. It's only once you get to the end of the social link that change really begins to happen. For the majority of the social link, you just think less and less of him until he realizes that he's just been using eating and the cult as escapism. He isn't actually dealing with his problems. Living under his brother's shadow isn't easy, but it doesn't have to be that way. He's under this impression that he has to climb to the top of this mountain to get out from underneath his brother's shadow. But what he realizes towards the end is that he can be himself today and sidestep that shadow. It's only looming over him if he lets it. Tolerating all that bullshit to get there, the main character is a kinder soul than anyone else for sure. If it were me, that social link would have gone a real different. But I'm not the main character. I don't have the patience to deal with this piece of shit and help him realize his potential. I hardly even have the patience to realize my own potential. But you know what the real salt in the wounds is? You know what replaced this? 30 minutes of trite bullshit that makes a complete mockery of Shinji's character. No wonder why he died. I want to die too if I had to read this shit. And I feel real bad for the people who only played the female main character, because they missed out on so much. I really enjoyed the Hermit social link, not only because you get to high-five Kenji at the end of it, but because I spent a lot of time playing really old, really shitty MMOs, and the social link reminds me of those days where I'd boot up something like Astonia 3. So as I was saying, the party member social links blow. Why? Because they didn't reserve development for social links. They had the ability to do this crazy thing while writing the story. What if, and stay with me here, what if we had the character development happen during the story? Every single character except for the dog develops their character along the way. I mean, even Shinji develops. It's a pretty radical transformation if you ask me. There are characters that I really don't care for, like Team Killer Ken. You know, this guy just telepathically hears from a mile away that Shinji doesn't want to remember what happened on the day that his mom died. It's a super vague connection to make, and he isn't even bothering to ask about it. I know that he doesn't literally pull the trigger, but it's just wild to me that this 12-year-old shows up with a vengeance plot. He doesn't really develop that much either. Contrast this to how Junpei develops. This guy is one of my favorite characters in all of Persona, so I have a huge bias and I won't lie. He goes from being jealous of you, having something to prove, and being a generally reckless, goofy character, to one of the most reliable people that you have on your team. He's still a goofball, but you can see through the cracks that it's always just been for show. You realize that his dad is an alcoholic and that getting away from the dorms was a godsend for him. You realize that he's only jealous of you because fighting is the one thing that he has that he actually sees himself as good at. And in the end, when shit goes down, he admits to you that he can't just force himself to not be jealous. He's still jealous, but he's counting on you in the upcoming battle for the fate of mankind. He also apologizes for the times that he acted out.
Wow. Becoming such good friends that I'd trust you with my life. I never would have imagined that happening last spring.
Character development is the building blocks and driving force of any good story. It's really sprinkled throughout, and it helps break up the slow-paced nature of the game. The plot starts off really slow, and it can really hamper the experience. I know a handful of people who quit right after the full moon segments end, right when the end of the game starts, and it isn't really a wonder why. The story starts to slow down before it can drop the revelation on you that everyone is going to die. Once again, the topic of death emerges. The story starts to pick up shortly after you realize that you fucked the entire world in your quest to save it. The stakes turn up to 11 and there's this genuine sense of dread. Even playing my first time on Portable, it was so clear to me that something was wrong. As the days go by, more loss fill the streets, and graffiti begins to appear everywhere. It really helps sell the desperate situation. For an entire month, you and your party members come to terms with the fact that they probably aren't going to live to see spring. There's an entire ending dedicated to the idea of rejecting the game's themes and ideas and looking away from death. The game doesn't really sell it as a bad ending right away either. It plays a lot like a good ending, and it doesn't have some sort of horrifying reveal of Nyx.
This is gonna be a fun year. I can feel it.
It's the same day the good ending happens on, with a skip forward. With everyone forgetting about the entire game's events, they revert back to their old selves, regressing entirely, while Yukari hammers home a twisted version of the game's ideas. And the words that these characters say to you, when taken out of context, they don't mean anything. You could show this to anybody. You could show this ending to somebody out of context, and they wouldn't understand it. But it's once you've gone on that journey, once you've seen these characters develop, that it's like twisting a knife in your heart. But if you choose to face death head on, then everyone accepts the cards dealt to them and lives with it. Accepting death as an inevitability, but refusing to go out without a fight. It's this situation that makes SEES an excellent opposition to Strega. Strega is a mysterious organization founded by the Kirijo group, but unlike SEES, they aren't trying to stop the Dark Hour or anything noble like that. Instead, Strega is living life as they see fit. They take advantage of the Dark Hour and abuse its powers for their revenge site, and immediately turn on you and kill Shenji the moment that they realize what you're up to. Initially, the similarities between Strega and SEES seem small. They're two completely different forces with almost nothing in common, and it isn't until the end of the game that we're given their background. Looking to combat shadows, the Kirijo group did experiments on over 100 kids and forced them to awaken to their personas, and out of those 100, only 3 came out alive, those being Chihiro, Takaya, and Jin. Ever since then, they've lived knowing that they weren't long for this world. The powers that they possess didn't come naturally, and without medicine, their own persona will manifest against their will and kill them. The medicine comes at a steep price, however, and taking it slowly kills you. For Strega, they're aware of their mortality. Death is an inevitability. Takaya saved the other 2 members from themselves and built the group with them, and since then, they'd begun to live their life as they see fit. They're willing to take excessive measures to stop you from ruining their way of life, and that's why Takaya doesn't hesitate to kill not 1 of your teammates, but 2.
Look out, Junpei! This is gonna be a fun year. I can feel it.
When people say that they aren't a threat, I just don't understand. In what universe is a group with a guy who shoots people before they can even stop to think about summoning their personas not a threat? Imagine if you were watching Dragon Ball Z and Frieza pulled out a Glock and shot Goku. You can see their mentality in all of their encounters, and I think that they're excellent parallels to the group. You can see it even in Chidori, who probably gets the most screen time. The moment that she gets attached to Junpei, she begins to fear death once again, and at that point Takaya sees her as tainted. It's excellent twisting of the Stoic ideals. The idea is that concepts such as the future and past can control us and make us afraid of living our lives, restricting us by making us think that we have something to lose. Once she meets Junpei and falls in love, she realizes that once she dies, she'll lose Junpei, causing her to become depressed and not want to see him anymore. Jin doesn't get as much screen time, but you can definitely see what kind of person he is. He lives life by his own accord, and when death is inevitable, he decides to take his life not once, but twice, just so that he has control over his fate. Whereas he might not be able to stop you, he can at least control how he dies. Now, Takaya. Takaya is a false prophet. There's a lot of comparisons to the main character in Jesus with the events that happen in the story, and this guy looks very strangely like Jesus himself. But whereas you have come to save mankind, he's come to damn it. Takaya, also known as Revolver Jesus, is all about understanding and accepting death. He's a walking twisted version of Memento Mori. Sure, he's going to die, but he's going to die doing what he loves, and it turns out that he really likes to see other people suffer. This is just my interpretation of it, but I would say that the reason he pulls people out of transmogrification and gets revenge on them for other people is so that he can have control over someone else's life unlike his own. By doing this, he can numb the pain of his inevitable death, and you can really see this come to the front when he climbs Tartarus just to see Nyx kill all of mankind. He wants to see the end of humanity, and he accepts his death while trying to prevent you from stopping Nyx, a supposedly unbeatable god. I just really like these guys and how they play out. I feel like they should have gotten more development, but they definitely played too many cards, which really hampered the experience as a whole.
Physical fitness, whatever. You know, whatever. You do what you like to do, I do what I like to do, okay? But you're a sucker. You're getting fed this line about how, like, you're gonna live forever or whatever. You're gonna die. Someone will kill you. Someone will kill you with a
gun.
Make sure your abs are friggin' ripped. You got some good guns. You want to look good for when you get
shot
with a
gun.
Sorry, that's how it works.
So after climbing Tartarus on the final day and reaching the top, what's waiting for you? Oh, you know, only one of the greatest bosses in any video game ever.
Pizza time.
God, that music is stellar. The entire soundtrack is stellar, but this one really pops as an outstanding example. The boss is iconic, and this whole fight just makes my dick rock hard. It's a tough fight that really tests you on what you've learned up until this point. The final moments of the game are just so good that they copied them for the next two entries. And then the game ends and you get a happy ending. You get to graduate, you get to talk to all your friends, and have some really wholesome, great moments with all of them. Then you get really tired and go to bed while Aegis holds you. It's a really touching ending that is in no way sad at all. Wait. No. I can't believe the main character's Anyways, the game's great. Highly recommended. FES is the best way to experience the game. You're all wonderful people, and I hope you have a good day.
Turn it off. Are you in charge of this? Turn it off. You really fucking watching this shit? Oh, God. Please.